Now we are here right at the entrance of Persepolis. The name of this place is the Gate of All Nations. So why this place is the Gate of All Nations? It's the topic of our tour. So Persepolis, which is located in southern Iran, is the most important ancient site of the country. And from here, you can have a good look to the entrance of the whole complex. Before I taking you in, let me share the map of Iran with you first, so you can have some sense of orientation where in Iran we are. Just remember this bit. We're gonna be back to the entrance of Persepolis, to the Gate of All Nations, and we're gonna continue exactly from here. I will take you all around Persepolis and share lots of stories with you tonight. So here you can see the map of modern Iran. So the modern Iran is a small part of the ancient Persia, which used to be a much bigger empire. We will see how big the empire used to be. Tehran is the capital, but the area that we are traveling tonight is Shiraz, which is one of the main cities in the south. There is a very famous brand of wine in the name of Shiraz, and it's an Australian wine. There's an interesting story behind that I cannot cover on this tour, but this is probably the main thing that people outside Iran might have heard the word Shiraz. Shiraz is the best place to visit the ancient sites, and actually Persepolis, the site that we are visiting, is 1 hour drive north in Shiraz on the way to Isfahan. So it's pretty much in the southern part of the country. All around Shiraz, there are lots of interesting sites to visit. So with this initial introduction, let me take you back to Persepolis. So Persepolis is 2,500 years old. And on those days, between 2,500 years ago to 2,300 years ago, lots of the kings or the representatives used to come to Persepolis from all around the world to do Nowruz ceremony, which is the start of the Persian New Year. It's the celebration of spring with the Persian king. And here used to be the entrance of Persepolis. That's why it's got the name, the Gate of All Nations. Before I take you to Persepolis, towards the ancient footsteps of those local kings or the representatives, I want to share a video with you guys about Nowruz. I know that some of the people who has joined to our live tonight are Iranian or probably familiar with Nowruz, but we get quite a lot of people who might not be familiar. That's why we're starting our live with explaining about Nowruz. After that, I will start talking you around Persepolis and we'll continue this live.
Nowruz literally means new day, and it's symbolic of the fact that it happens right when the spring equinox happens.
Okay, for friends who are following from Facebook, it will be some people who leave some links. I apologize for that. We try to block them as much as we could, but please ignore them. If you ignore them, it will be all good. As you can see, Nowruz, the celebration of spring, which is the celebration of recreation, is a very important thing in Iranian culture. So, and it's a very meaningful thing. It's a very symbolic thing that shows lots of different aspects of Iranian way of thinking. After the gates got into this place, these gates, they are both sides. One is a lion and the other one is the bull. Used to be the entrance gate. After they got in, right behind the gates, we had an hole that we are inside the hole now. So this place used to be an ancient hall with some really high walls, and you can see the sitting decks for the guests to waiting to be greeted. You can see the other gates from behind. So after the guests being greeted, it usually used to be a Persian soldier from the immortal groups. I will explain that later, or a magi who were been greeting the guests. And after they greeting the guest, they were guiding the guest and walking them towards the main hall of Persepolis, which was Apadana Hall. It was the place that they were doing the celebration. Let's walk into the main footsteps, and you can see the door that they could have got into Persepolis in the old times. All around Persepolis, you can see all these ancient columns and inscriptions from the past. Lots of the inscriptions has meaning and they're very symbolic. I will talk more about that later on the tour. These columns are pretty exciting. Some of them are up to 20 meters and they can be up to 180 tons. So Persepolis is like a majestic thing in ancient engineering and art. The artisans from all over the Persian Empire and world, they would used to come to here to offer their art. So lots of the technology and styles has been borrowed from the rest of the world, but it's been lots of innovation here as well. Like those columns that you saw, like in the way that they are high and they are thin, it's been quite unique in Persepolis, how they made these columns like that. So we are moving around Persepolis. You can see the different parts of the complex, the ancient kings, different people. The windows and the gates remaining from the past. And the view of the plain. So Persepolis has been built on a big deck. The deck overlooking the whole plain of Marvdasht. And the deck is around 14 meters higher than the rest of Persepolis, the plain. So Persepolis has been a 200-year project, 150-year project. And when the time that the Greeks come to this place and when Alexander came, it had still been some areas being under construction. So the whole place has been built on this ancient deck. You can see the ancient palaces and the inscriptions. And you have a surface, which is the place that the palaces are. And right under the deck, there are lots of irrigation system, drainage system, and all these kind of things that are required to make the maintenance happen. We are about to finish our first roaming around the Persepolis. So before I take you out of this step, I want to I have a question from you. So here you can see one of these old inscriptions. You can see the Persian kings, of course, in front, and he has two guards chasing him. So you can see one of the kings, one of the guards who carry an umbrella to protect the king against the burning sun. But there is another thing in the hand of the other person. Please type in a chat box or comment in the Facebook. What do you think? What is that thing in the hand of the other guard? The other guard. I want to see who can guess right. Snake. Snake. Can see the comments coming through. A fan. Yeah, it's good guesses. Palm fan, some good guesses, not that far. Trumpet, interesting. Yeah, what is the other thing in the hand of the other person? Like there is an umbrella in the hand of one of the guards. What is the other thing in the hand of the other person? Whisk, staff, water, fly water. Yeah. John, I will share a whole lot of information about Persepolis. Peacock feather, a knife, good. So we have some good guesses. Actually, these things in the hand of the other person is a fly repellent. So the other one person protect the king against the sun and rain, but the other person protect the king against the flies to sit on his face and bother him. Because this guy was the king of the world. What was the little fly? Who was the little fly to sit on his face and bother the king? Which is pretty cute. In the start of the tour, we just roaming around in Persepolis to give you some sense of the place. And after that, I will start explaining about lots of the background thing and technicalities of Persepolis for sure. So before taking you to the next step, and after showing around Persepolis the way you can see it nowadays, I want to share a video with you. And on this video, you can see the recreation of Persepolis. So you can see the simulation of Persepolis. Yeah, the king is Xerxes, very good. Yes, very good, good guesses. I will share this quick video, and in this video, you can see how Persepolis used to look like in the days that it was the capital of Persia. Okay, now that we had a bit of time travel to see how Persepolis used to look like, it's time to talk about more details. Lots of my audiences, when they see this video, they said that they never thought of that the black color might have been used. So lots of those columns inside Apadana Hall, the place that you could have seen like the recreation, where they had a coating of the black marble. And that's where that black color come from. And they've been gold coated as well. So it's been a mix of black and golden color. But this style of having the big holes with the columns, it's something that has started from ancient Egypt. And on those days, like the columns used to be pretty thick. But in Persepolis, having these columns thin could have give the chance to have lots of lights in the building. So the black marble couldn't be any problem. So now in this part of the tour, I want to share more about the background and the story of Persepolis. Here is one of the painting from the sites that has been done by one of the European travelers around 300 years ago. So since the very old times, people in this area know about these ruins that has been here, somewhere like 50 kilometers north in Shiraz, but people had no idea what are these things. The local people were usually thinking that this place is a place that the ancient Iranian mythological hero Jamshid has been built, or some gods or something has been heard. They were calling this with the Takht Jamshid, which is the name of that king, or 100 columns or 14 minarets or like that. In the 19th century, it's been some report of this place by lots of the archaeologists. So the first person who's done some research here was a guy from France, and he did some research, but he was thinking that he is visiting a site that actually is one of the that's I'm explaining. In that excavation at 19th century, they were assuming that they are visiting, they are working on a site that is probably related to the ancient Greeks' heritages, because they were finding that lots of the columns and lots of the things has similarity with ancient Greece. So the first excavation wasn't that serious, and actually the guy didn't realize that he's visiting Persepolis, that it's been lots of mention of it in the history. After that first excavation, the second one has been done in 1930, and it was a professional excavation that has been done by the University of Chicago. And the head of the team was a German archaeologist, Herzl. And actually, it was Herzl who realized, you can see one of the photos when he was doing the excavation and the initial digging in the place, one of the things that has been found. So Herzl that realized Persepolis is the site which is older than lots of the temples that we have in Greece. And it is a very important site by itself, and it is one of the main heritages in Persia. Something to be considered as it as a whole thing, not as a continuing architectural site from the Greek or something like that. So that was the start of us knowing more about Persepolis. That has been lots of mention of that in the ancient mythology. Persepolis is from 2,500 years ago, and it's a site that has left from Achamenid dynasty, or the first Persian Empire. On this map, it's a little bit of reorientation again. You can see the map of the modern Iran in the center, but you can see three other territories that are the territories of the Persia in different time. So this yellow, the largest territory, which is really big, is the territory of the first Persian Empire, or Achamenid dynasty. We call it Hachamenid. So the Achamenid dynasty, like the Persian those days, used to be 6 times bigger than the modern Iran. And it was almost the same size as the United States or Canada by the standards of nowadays. So Achamenid kings, the Achamenid dynasty has started by Cyrus the Great, 2,600 years ago. Cyrus was the son of one of the head of the Persian tribes, and his mother was from the Med king. Before his time, Meds could have taken the power, and they started an initial way of the uniting of the tribes in the area. But soon they become very cruel against the people. And Cyrus was actually a person from the royal families of Persia that been against that cruelty, and he became the rebel. He could have overthrew the Meds king, and he throned himself as a king. So before Cyrus' time, we used to have lots of civilizations in the area, lots of them like ancient Egypt, Babylon, and Assyria. The core of them were mainly few cities under the same kingdom, and a big part of their politics were mainly based on attacking the other nations. And if they could have won the battle, either slave them or kill them. Cyrus was a great military leader and a perfect strategist, but more than being a perfect strategist, Cyrus was great in winning the people's heart. So he conquered 27 of the kingdoms of the world. On those days, it used to be only 28 kingdoms. And the last one that left behind was ancient Egypt, and his son, Cambodia or Cambyses, conquered that side. So Achamenid is kind of getting the all civilized part of the world on their time, and they created the first real empire. But more than being a military leader or a genius strategist, Cyrus was great in winning the people's heart. So he didn't even kill a single king out of the 27 kingdoms. He was always happy for the local kings to remain in their power and they have the local order, as long as they were happy to follow his like empire order and pay him taxes and help him in the army. So what I'm telling you is some of the first signs of the imperialism in the politics, but it was Cyrus who realized and make such a thing happen in the history. Let me switch my screen because I can see that the when people want to come to the meeting room, that influence the way of the streaming. So we can get a better live streaming. Yeah, now we won't have that problem anymore. Cyrus was a great military leader and a perfect strategist, but more than that, he was great in winning the people's heart. And this was actually the reason why we have the first empire in the history here. And Cyrus was been 2,600 years ago, and he is the person who has started Persia. After Cyrus, his son in the war on the way back from the Egypt died for some reason, which is one of the mysteries of the history. And after Cambyses, his son, the people from like Darius, who was from the Vishtasp family, in Achamenid family, become the king. He got to the power in a very tricky way. We're not really 100% sure if death of Cambyses was a scheme or it was something. It was something that just happened, or it was something that Darius did that to take the power. So when Darius became the king, he started to put lots of system and organizations in the empire, as you can see. Darius picked to have 3 different capitals because they had a big empire. So Ekbatana or modern Hamadan was the capital in the north for the summertime. Susa or Shush was the capital for winter time, and Persepolis used to be the capital for the Nowruz time. And what you can see is a royal highway, this red line that used to take Susa, the winter capital, to Lydia, which is in the Western Turkey nowadays. So this royal highway with a distance of 2,500 kilometers used to take people really quickly to all around the empire. So we had a look at the Persepolis. Darius was the person who started construction of Persepolis. And he did that to mainly do Nowruz ceremony. So from Nowruz time, in the way that we have it now, that in Persepolis, that people used to come here to celebrate and give the gift to the king, it started from Darius time. And I had a question about Roman Empire and things. I will answer those questions at the end. Achamenid used to be in the power before Achamenid time, but they used to be in the power in the end of the ancient civilization. So actually, ancient Egypt became a part of the empire. So after the representatives got into Persepolis, they used to walk in Persepolis all the way towards Apadana Hall, the hall that you can see it here. And it was the main center of doing the ceremony. You can see the recreation phase of the Darius based on what has been mentioned from him and the statues that had left behind. Now I want to take you to Apadana Palace. So after the representatives walked all the way towards Apadana Hall, they could have walked down these stairs. And when they walked down these stairs, they could have seen the main entrance of Apadana Hall right in front of them. After they walk, they could have got into the entrance of the hall. They had to walk up the stairs again. And the main hall used to be right behind these stairs. Nothing much left from the main hall. But however, this part of Persepolis is one of the best preserved one, and you can see the inscriptions that are pretty important in their meaning. Actually, the most important inscription of Persepolis is right here, right under the stairs. And it's this one. So right under the stairs, we can have this inscription, which is the inscription of the guests of the complex. And every group of the guests has a gift for the king from their own area. So it's 28 different groups. Every group has their own local costume, and they've got a gift for the king from their own area. It's a really important ancient evidence, because from this inscription, we can exactly know who used to be the people on those time, what was their tradition, what was their costumes. And there are also some supporting inscriptions in writing, either here right next to the inscription or in the treasury of Persepolis, that explain much more about them. Every group is guarded by a magi right down, or a Persian soldier on the top, and cypress trees are separated. Here is one of the inscriptions in the ancient writing that talked about who were these people and why they were here. Here is a recreation of Apadana, the first place that I showed it to you. It's been some findings of this glazing on the top of the roofs with the blue and gold color. That's where we have noticed. So these writings are in 3 languages. It's in Babylonic language. It's in everyone can hear me well? Yeah. It's in Babylonic language, it's in Elamite language, in its Aramic. Later, Darius created the ancient Persian writing as well. So from the later times, we have from Xerxes' time mainly, we have the writings in ancient Persian as well. Darius to become a king, he married with the daughter of Cyrus. And the daughter of Cyrus, his name is Atusa. And Atusa is one of the main people in some of the it's one of the important women in the history. It's lots of mentions of her in the old Greek books, and she is one of the symbols of a strong woman in the ancient time. So in Persepolis, we find a figurine from Atusa, and based on this figurine, we kind of recreated her face. So we think Atusa, the Darius wife, who was the daughter of Cyrus, should have looked like something like this, which is really interesting. Atusa had lots of power, and she had lots of word to say in the politics at the backstage. After Apadana, which was mainly for the Nowruz ceremony, Darius built some other palaces that I will take you through. But before that, I just want to zoom on some of the photos of the inscriptions that had left behind. Here you can, from the close look, here you can see the groups of people from Babylon on the top. They've got the traditional Babylon costume, and they look like the old Babylonic people. And they've got a bull for the king as a gift. And they are guarding with a Persian soldier. It's very interesting because especially like these garments that you find in the hand of this man, we have really similar clothes or garments being found in ancient Babylon. Or the groups down are from the ancient Lydia. These guys been famous to be good at working with the gold. And they've got some golds in the area like as a gift for the king. Again, lots of the things that had been found in the same area, we have lots of interesting golden bracelet and things exactly similar to what we had found in Persepolis. Maybe the most interesting nation, at least from my point of view, is the people who used to come to Persepolis from Ethiopia. So these people, they're bringing animal as a gift for the king. And it's a bit of different ideas. What was this animal? But you can see the African look, the black face and the curly hair. But some people believe that this is a giraffe. It wasn't enough place to have a giraffe in the accurate dimensions. But lots of other people believe that this one is an okapi. It's a rare animal, live in the same area in southern Sudan and some part of Ethiopia and those countries. It's an animal that we in the West know only for less than 100 years. But people believe that like this one, this animal that used to be brought to Persia as a gift is an okapi. It's ancient time, which is a very interesting thing. So every group, they have their own thing from their time, and we can actually know a lot about those civilizations and about their culture. After Apadana, and after showing this really interesting inscription, I want to take you to the other place. The last thing that has been found while excavating the sites, it was this golden and silver clock right under the foundation. So Darius had ordered to have these plaques on the four corners of Apadana for the future people, and mentioned about he who was the king of Persia, and he built this place for the people of the world, and is the servant of Ahura Mazda, was the main god of Zoroastrians. Right next to Apadana, you can see the harem. The harem has rebuilt in the form of the ancient Persepolis, and it is actually a museum. So inside the old harem, you can see some of the things that had been found in Persepolis over the periods of time. In the other side of harem, we have Tachar Palace. Tachar Palace used to be the winter residence. It was kind of place that Darius used to spend time and see his guests in a less formal way. And it's a very important palace in terms of architecture in Iranian history. This tale of Tachar Palace actually replicated itself during the history in lots of the more modern palaces and buildings inside Persia. So Tachar Palace used to have a columned hall, and inside the palace we had all these inscriptions. Yeah, but Sumerian was probably better to answer that before, but Sumerian was much earlier than Achemenids. Aramic were from Semitic language family, but what happened that on those days, Aramic being the people who used to do lots of governance and writing. That's why we have Aramic language and writing all around. We are inside Tachar Palace. Tachar Palace used to overlook a garden, a beautiful garden. And inside the palace, now we are inside one of the old halls. There is a say that it's been lots of shiny rocks, something like the mirrors that we have nowadays. So when you were inside this main hall in Tachar Palace, you could have actually seen yourself. It was like a mirror room. So both having a palace with the columns overlooking the whole place and have a garden in front of you. Here you can see the back of Tachar Palace, and having a hall or a room with lots of the mirrors. It's quite a bit of a style in even nowadays. You can see a recreation of Tachar Palace. Another recreation of Tachar Palace. And what I want to do now, I want to share some of the palaces from the later time, the palaces that share the same architecture. So the first place that I want to show it to you is Artax's Palace, which is in Firuzabad, the 1-hour drive southern Shiraz. It's from 1800 years ago, and you can see the consistency in the design of this palace and Tachar Palace. That's a really great example how Persepolis were like the initiator for lots of the engineering within ancient Persia. So you can see the same thing. You can see a water reflection right in front of the hall. That was the thing that we had in Tachar Palace. And it's a balcony that overlooks this view of the garden style courtyard right in front of the palace. If we come to the much more modern time, to the times that people didn't have any memory from Persepolis, we can still see that consistency. So even though people has forgotten about Persepolis, lots of the styles had been left in the architecture and art. So here you can see Chehel Sütun Palace from around 550 years ago in Isfahan. And what you can see, it's same. It's a balcony with columns. It's water reflection right in front of the palace. And here is Golestan Palace in Tehran from 150 years ago. Again, the time that we didn't have any knowledge of the Tachar Palace. And the Persian architect, they built the whole thing based on this idea. He made a room full of the mirrors. in the palace. So it's very interesting how, even though people forgot about Persepolis, all the things in the architecture and style had left behind, had been consistent. After Xerxes, his son, after Darius, his son Xerxes came to the power. Xerxes was famous for being really good looking and for his very Persian style eyes. Darius was the person who started those famous wars with the Greeks. During his time, a group of the Athenians, they attacked to another Greek living city under the Persian Empire. And on that war, they threw the fire in the temple of that Greek living city. And Darius wanted to give Athenians a lesson, not to attack to any city under his rule. So he set a war on the Greeks. That was the start of a long, famous war in the ancient time. The Greeks resisted pretty much, and it was a surprise for a local kingdom to resist against a big empire like that, which is the topic of lots of the stories in the past. The wars hasn't finished in Xerxes' time, in Darius' time, and Xerxes continued those wars. So Xerxes was the son of Atusa, the daughter of Cyrus. And somebody said that he was so willing to continue those wars under the influence of Atusa. Getting out of those old war stories, when Xerxes came to the power, he changed the main hall of Persepolis to another hall. So he built a new hall with the name of Satsutun, or the hall of 100 columns. And from his time, the ceremony has been done in the hall of 100 columns. So Apadana used to have 72 columns, and Satsutun has 100 columns. Now you can see the remaining part from the 100 columns hall. Nothing much left from the halls, and the main damage happened after the fire that happened in Alexander time. The 100 were representing the number of the head of the Achamenid immortal army. So part of Achamenid, who were the scariest part of the army, used to be a group of 10,000 men with the name of immortals. And those 10,000 men used to have 100 commanders. So it is said that this hall has been built with 100 columns to represent those 100 commanders who were the columns of the empire. Immortals were called immortals because they were always 10,000 people. So as soon as one person died from the group or got injured, like the injured person used to be replaced by another soldier. And as a result of that, the number 10,000 always were constant. So, and these guys were the people who were guiding the guests in Persepolis. Not in Persepolis, but in Susa, the winter capital of Persians, there is an inscription left from immortals with the original glazing, which is really exciting. This one is in Louvre Museum. So you can see the original color and you can see the look of the Persian soldiers. After Xerxes, it's been another king, and this important king is Artaxerxes II. You can see his tomb right next to Persepolis. So Artaxerxes were famous to be a very kind man, and you can see Persepolis site from the top. Artaxerxes was a very kind and tolerant man, but when it comes to the politics, he were doing lots of lobbying and lots of the things at the backstage. That actually was the main reason that he could have ruled the Greeks very well. But when Artaxerxes came to the power, he had a big problem, and that one was his younger brother, a guy that we call him in the history as Cyrus the Little. So the problem was that their mother, the queen of Persia, and the wife of Xerxes, she was really good at setting the agenda and having the schemes, and she wanted to control the politics a lot. And Cyrus the Little was her favorite son. However, the Xerxes wanted Artaxerxes to come to the power, and Artaxerxes was the oldest son. One of the things that Cyrus the Little used to be a very cruel man, and people were thinking that he can be a good king, some people. But anyhow, Artaxerxes the second came to the power. And even though Cyrus the Little wanted to kill him before getting throned, he forgave his brother, but he kind of exiled Cyrus the Little to the Greek living part of the empire. But even there, he used to be a local king. So when Cyrus the Little been in those Greece areas and Eastern Turkey, he created an army from the Greek people to attack to Persia, to take over Persia and become the king. He could have won that battle. He lost the battle and he got killed in the war. But what you can see here is his tomb, not far from Shiraz. And the interesting thing that his tomb is a smaller version of Pasargadi, which is the tomb of Cyrus. So Cyrus the Great was the person who started Persia, and Cyrus the Little was actually the person who gave that idea of attacking to the heart of the empire. 20 years after this war, the time that people were still remaining Cyrus the Little, Alexander from Macedonia he could have taken over the Athens. And while he was in Athens, he suggested the Greeks that he will be happy to attack to Persia if the Greeks support him. And the Greeks still remember that war, that they could have easily reached to the heart of Persia through the royal highway. And still angry of Persians, they liked that idea. So this time, when the group of the Greeks under the new commander Alexander, who probably been much more genius than Cyrus the Little, got into Persia, they could have won the battle. And that was the end of the first Persian Empire or Achamenid dynasty. When Alexander got into Persepolis, and you shouldn't forget that Alexander, when he was in Persepolis for the first time, he was only a teenager. He listened to his council, his minister, that asked him to fire Persepolis. So in this way, the Persians would have forgotten about Persepolis and Achamenid, and they will be able to rule the whole country forever. So because of that, Alexander threw the big fire, and the fire has started from the personal palace of Xerxes, who was Hadish Palace. Maybe as a revenge that he was the person who threw the fire in Apollon Temple. That fire was huge, and one of the things that been the fashion in Persepolis, those guys used to make the ceilings out of wood. Maybe because to make the ceilings a bit lighter, so they could have had these good-looking columns. And those wooden ceilings added up to the power. So as a result of that fire and the destruction of the ceilings, a big damage happened to Persepolis, especially to the columns. Alexander attacked all around Persia. Like, he could have conquered some of the places, but in some of the locations, he kind of get to compromise and kind of get to some terms with the local people. And he got to marry with a Achamenid princess. He got to kill murderer of the last Persian king. And after a fair bit of time, he was trying to show some kindness to Persian. Maybe it was the time that Alexander been older, and he came to the point that conquering an empire is one thing, but maintaining it is another thing. But that was the time that some of the Greeks and Macedonians didn't like that idea. So at the end of the empire, like the Persians were rebellious against Alexander. They couldn't have forgotten the fire of the Persepolis, but also the Greeks commanders and the Macedonians didn't like the way Alexander were trying to make the balance between the Persians and the Greeks. And in the second time, when he was back to Persepolis, he said a Greek commander, but asked him to speak in Persian and behave like a Persian. And after that, he got back to Babylon, and he passed away in the age of 33 years old, or 34 years old. So it is said that he was poisoned out of over drinking, but it's one of the mysteries of the history. There are some saying that Alexander actually might have poisoned by one of the groups of the opponents. And that was the end of his time being a conqueror of the Persia. The Greeks were ruling the Persia for around 80 years until a group of the Aryan tribes from Central Asia, the Scythian people, they could have overthrew the Greeks and pushed them out, and they creating the second Persian Empire or Partisan Empire. We had a question about the Roman Empire. Actually, Roman Empire and Partisan Empire, or Achamenid, they started almost in the same time. So that question. Persepolis is a very important site in terms of the science, in terms of it depicting the politics of the time and whole lots of things. But now I want to take you back to Apadana. It's the last bit of the tour, and talk about another important inscription in Persepolis. To me, apart from all those political genius and military army and making a big empire and lots of power, Persepolis is important because it is the first place in the history that actually we could have, we can see the blessing, kindness, and tolerance as a political propaganda or a political manifesto. So in the style of Persepolis, you get creativity and make the things much nicer and more beautiful comparing to lots of the palaces and buildings in ancient Egypt and some of the things in the Greeks and Assyria and Babylon. It's like nothing new. It's been something to refine the place or make the buildings and inscriptions based on what it used to be in Persia. But what is new and what is the first time? That it's the first time that you can see people in peace, people in harmony, and they hold each other's hand and they celebrate with each other. Whereas in the most of the inscriptions we have from daytime, or in all of the inscriptions, it's all talk of the killing of the other people and burning the sites and all these kind of things. So returning to Apadana Palace, I talked about that important inscriptions that were depicting the nations of the world. But right before the entrance of Apadana, there is another very important inscription, which is like a great political manifesto, but it's a really good thing to understand the soul of the Persian culture on those days. So the name of modern Iran used to be Persia on those days. So if you have a look at this inscription, on both sides, you can see a lion and a bull. So the lion is the star location of the sun and summer, and bull is the star location of the winter. So a lion jumping on a bull is the symbol of the winning of the warmth against the cold, which mean the start of the spring from astronomic point of view. But this inscription is much more into it. So you can see 4 Persian soldiers on both sides, and the Persian soldiers have the Persian costume and they're holding a spear. So in Persian mythology, Like the straight line is the symbol of the truth, and a spear is the weapon of the truth because it's a straight. So a Persian soldier standing and holding a spear, it's the sign of that the Persians used to be the people who were standing for themselves and carrying the by the weapon of the truth. But this lion and bull has other meanings as well. So you know that every human psyche has a feminine and has a masculine part. So this bull or cow is the symbol of the feminine part of the soul, the part that the creativity, nurturing, insights, all these qualities come from. Also our desires and wants. It comes from the feminine part of the soul. And the lion or the masculine part of the soul is the part that try to deal with the world and put the right order in the world. So a lion jump on a bull, it doesn't mean that the Persians used to be male chauvinistic. It's got a meaning that the Persians used to believe to be able to rule the world and to put the right order in the world, they need to use and get fed from the inspirations, from the creativity, from the feminine part, also even from the desires and wants. They were thinking that desires and wants are not a bad thing, but they need to be in charge with them and they need to get fed by them. So this whole thing is the meaning of the word Iran on those days. Iran was an adjective in Achamenid time, and it means the land of the people who had ear quality. And the people who were ear were the people who were humble and the people who had the quality that I just explained. The people who stand for themselves with the weapon of the truth, but before that, they always get inspiration from the inside. That was the way the Iranians or Persians were thinking about themselves. And maybe that's why they had showing that mercy after they become the strongest people in the world. And that's the interesting thing for me. That's the most important part of Persepolis, being the first place to show the mercy and blessing, not like being a place that conquered the rest of the world and all this kind of thing. However, later in the history, other things that happened as well. And I will finish my tour with some photos of the inscriptions of the 28 nations. I only showed 2 of them. And after that, I will be here for your questions. So if you have any questions or things or comment, please type in them in the Zoom chat box or in the Facebook comments, and I try to cover them as much as we can. You can see different photos from the inscriptions. You can see the European Scythian people who had some deers for the king. You can see one of the Persian warriors, the Babylonian people and people from Lydia. You can see a Magi and a Persian soldier. Just look at this, how the Persian soldier from the group of immortal, he was like a really high rank warrior, hold the hand of the guest, and that is a sign of friendship and brotherhood. Some of the old things from the site, some of the figures and artwork on the inscription. See how these people chatting and greeting each other, and everyone is happy. Some of the views from Apadana Palace overlooking Tasha Palace. Tasha Palace, an example of a classic Persian architecture. And this is the funny thing. Later in the history, some of the kings, they tried to have this sign on Persepolis without knowing about where this site used to be. So this is one of the inscriptions from a few hundred years ago. And one of the kings on that times, when he's seeing the runes, he tried to have his sign in this place as well. And one of the old inscriptions, just have a look at these soldiers and kind of symmetry. Actually, the arrow holder is on the left shoulder of the soldiers. And you can see even in the other side, still it's on the left hand. You can see the holder from the back from another angle. So kind of the detail of the artwork in Persepolis. So that was the virtual tour of Persepolis. I hope you have enjoyed it. Persepolis is a massive site. You can speak it for hours. So I tried to cover the basic thing in a 1 hour span of time. Forgive me if I missed any point or if I missed any details. I tried to do my best. I hope you have enjoyed. Now I want to get back to the comments. Oh, look at that. It's a whole lot of the questions and comments. So let me start. And thanks for coming. I will put the recordings in my YouTube channel as well, and the recordings been live on my Facebook page. So before going to the questions, I do lots of the virtual tours of Iran and Uzbekistan, and I'm highlighting Samarkand and Bukhara. Feel free to have a look at my website or my Facebook page. If you like, you can join to those tours. So I can show more of Persia or the heritage in the area to you. Or if you want to have the recordings, I have a free live every month. So you can see the recordings in my YouTube channel. I will leave them in the chat box, both in Facebook and both in Zoom. Don't forget to subscribe. And after that, I will start scrolling up and answering the question. Also, thank you so much, Alex.